Do you like movies and television? Would you like to learn more about the magic behind the movies and learn how they get from the minds of the creators to the screen? Do you consider yourself a bit of a film buff and would like to know more without going back to school? Then this is the show for you. Mincing Movie Magic is a broadcast designed to stimulate your intellect and explore the minds of screenwriters, producers, directors, and others behind the scenes who create the real magic we see on the screen. Each week, you can listen to screenwriter and producer Tom Blomquist and professional magician Scott Wells as they discuss film and the magic that goes into every production. From time to time, they welcome friends from the movie industry to give other points of view that brought their visions to life on screen. This is Mincing Movie Magic. Please welcome Hollywood writer, producer, and director Tom Blomquist, along with your host, Scott Wells.
And there we are. Hey there, Tom. How are you, man?
I'm good. Scott. How you doing?
Fine. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you, sir.
Have a little bit of scotch here before we go.
Yes.
Want to remind everybody and welcome everyone who is in the room here this evening. Let's see who we have. Jim Hathey looks like is in here. Hi, glad that you're here. And as I want to point out, as people do come in, please make sure that you will identify yourself, say hello. Be sure to put your comments and questions in there if you have anything as we kind of go along. So this way we can respond to those questions. This is kind of like a film school, if you will. Certainly that tonight we've got two professors here, legitimate professors who have taught and are teaching right now. And so, or Tom, you have in the past. And this is just a lot of fun and to ask questions about movies and television or whatever it is as we go down different directions. So I think there's just going to be a lot of information that will be imparted. And I'm excited to have you guys here and also with my guests, with my buddy Tom. And Tom's going to talk a little bit and introduce our special guest we got here this evening. Who is this going to be here tonight? Who we got, Tom?
Well, I don't know. Who is it? Oh,
I never heard of the guy.
This is a colleague of mine and a friend and a co-worker, Kevin O'Brien, who is the director of the film program at El Camino College in Los Angeles. He is also an adjunct professor extraordinaire at California State University in Long Beach, where I taught. He's in an alum of that school, and we taught side by side and collaborated on quite a few teaching type things and some professional projects. There was a couple of industrial videos that we worked on together. He was the cinematographer and I directed. And so we've known each other quite a long time, 15 years, I guess, or well, no, I was there 15 years. So it's almost 20 years now that we know each other. And time flies when you're having fun. We talk about legitimate professors. He's the legitimate professor. I was the illegitimate professor. So bring him in. Let's talk to him. And
sure.
But he's a wonderful guy. There he is.
Hey there, Kevin.
Good evening.
It's a good evening and even better now that you're here with us. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you being our guest here this evening. And so you're teaching at El Camino College. Is that in Los Angeles or where is it located?
Just south of Los Angeles. It's in Los Angeles County. It's maybe 20 minutes south of Los Angeles Airport in Torrance, California.
Do you think it's important, by the way, that people have a foundation in film? And I should say, if they want to get into film, that is in so many different areas. I mean, where they're working behind as a part of the crew or in front or behind the camera, is it important to actually have to go to school and to get an education in film or can it just be getting this kind of information kind of in the school of hard knocks?
I see Tom smiling there. I know he's heard this question as many times as I have. And I think the answer is there is no clear path into the entertainment industry. Film school is one of them. Getting a job on a crew or on a set and apprenticing your way through is another. Breaking in as a writer is another way. Having your uncle own half of Paramount Studios is probably the easiest way because that certainly helps when you have people on the inside that can vouch for you. I'm not sure how Tom got into this day.
I snuck through the back door.
Through the back door. But the idea of film school I think is really good for younger people who are interested in the entertainment industry, not just to learn the skills needed to make a movie, but the variety of opportunities that are out there for media production besides just making Hollywood movies. And I think that's where the education part is important. And also a lot of young wannabe filmmakers need more training in the basics of reading, writing, reports, working in groups, learning good communication skills, good work ethic. And those things can be learned in addition to filmmaking skills.
I would add to that. We talk about having an education in this. There's really two kinds of education. One would be a trade school, where it's a school about filmmaking and you learn all those craft skills. And then there's a university or community college type education where it's a broader spectrum antibiotic. You're learning about history and social studies and foreign languages and of course, the theory at a university is that it makes you a more well-rounded individual, prepares you better for life, but it may arguably make you a more well-rounded and prepared filmmaker if you understand more about the world, where we were, how we are now, where we're going, and all those other things that have nothing to do with how to set up a C-stand or what filter to put in front of a lens. And I think, that's an important distinction as well, but you don't need to go to college to be in the movie business. There's plenty of people just pick up a pair of work gloves and start helping out on the set and work their way up, apprenticing, as Kevin was talking about. And you get great filmmakers, work, some guy with an MFA from NYU and somebody that, graduated from high school only, and they're working side by side, and they both have a lot to contribute.
Well, wasn't that Mark Gant or someone we talked to recently who was a driver and kind of worked his way up to being an actor? I mean, you can do what, and I guess you were just driving people like
Mark Gant. Yeah.
Mark
Gant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was an aspiring actor, and he was on the show last week, Kevin. But yeah, he was a driver, working on movies and shuttling people around, and he worked his way through the art department. He was set decorating and worked his way up to acting and directing and producing. And he's extraordinary in all those fields. He didn't go to college to study that. He took it this other path. And just like Kevin's saying, there's a lot of different ways to get to the same place.
Well, there are so many people in the background who are part of the crew. I've got one question. Actually, my son had asked this. What does a best boy do? I mean, I see that. What is a best boy?
Well, first of all, it's a politically incorrect term now.
Oh, yeah. Right? Okay.
That's okay.
So what, are they a best person?
Well, it's, I think, bestie now, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah.
Isn't that the accepted term?
Yeah.
The bestie is the right-hand person to the gaffer. And the gaffer on a set, on a camera crew, there's two major divisions. There's camera, and then there's G&E, which is grip and electric. And that's the crew that's handling the lights, the generators, the power, the C-stands, the dolly equipment. And then camera is separate. That's camera operator, first assistant, second assistant. And they're dedicated to working with the lenses and the camera, along with the DIT, which is the digital imaging technician, who's going to keep track of all the data. And under that is the director of photography. And so the bestie is the right-hand person to the gaffer, who is the chief electrician on the set, who works under the director of photography.
Are there other kinds of positions that have changed over the years because of political correctness or for whatever reason? Again, whenever I see the credits, there are positions I've never heard of. And when, let's say I'm watching the Lord of the Rings and they've got 15 minutes worth of credits in very small type. I mean, there's a lot of CGI and everything. But over the years, how has that changed from the film noir days to today's digital?
Well, one that comes to mind is the script girl. Remember the script girl?
Mm-hmm.
That
what
was
did she do?
Script supervisor. I guess for a long time they were frequently women, but in fact, it's the person that, and we will have a script supervisor on in a few weeks. but they have the script. That's the official document of what happens on the shoot. They keep track of how many takes there were, what lens each take was utilized, what the director thought about those takes, where the take ended and why, out of focus, camera bobble, light fell on the actor, whatever it is, all that stuff is noted in this script. And how it was shot is indicated there as like a roadmap. So at the end of every day, whatever was shot that day is sent to the editing room, and the editor uses that to start compiling the first assembly of the footage.
Those are the dailies?
Right. They take the dailies and then they edit them together. And, the director says, "Oh, I like take one right up to this point, but then I hate the rest. I want to go with the master over here." And the script supervisor writes all that down and communicates that to the editor. Things will change later, but somebody has to be the official person. And then also there's continuity. Continuity girl was also the term, but it was who was wearing the hat and took it off on what line of dialogue. And Tom picks up the glass of scotch with his left hand, and then the next take he's at the right hand. Well, nope. They goes, nope. You had it in your left hand, and they take Polaroid pictures of everything on the set to make sure that if they have to come back 3 weeks later to retake a scene or add something, that everything is still where it was supposed to be and why. And of course, continuity mistakes are a popular fan thing that people read, watch on YouTube all the time.
They seem to be more rampant on television than they are in movies.
What's that?
I say they seem to be more rampant on television than they are movies, and I assume that's because they have so many hours during a day and a shorter shoot time for a series than they do for a movie.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, don't you think, Kevin? That's probably. They're moving really fast.
Yeah,
and they're shooting very often with multiple cameras now. So if you have 2 or 3 cameras covering a scene from different angles, and you do that scene 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you may take this left-hand camera from camera one for the first take, and the other camera over here the fourth take, and there may be continuity mistakes between those takes, but they have to use those shots for some reason, or simply they missed it. If they missed it and the editor didn't catch it, and then through all the edits, people just you don't even see things anymore. It's like when you're proofreading your own writing, you don't see
your own mistakes
anymore.
Right. I've got a question also then, Kevin, specifically being a professor over there. Do you have 2 or 3 different types of classes, or do you specialize in teaching about lighting or cinematography or directing, or what specialty, if any, do you have?
I would say I teach a variety of classes. My background in my own film school adventures, it was mostly in production and writing. But I also did a lot of studying in film history, media aesthetics. And so I like to kind of have a nice mix of both. So for instance, this semester, I'm teaching a couple sections of introduction to film editing. Then I have a couple sections of film aesthetics, and then I have one writing class. And so it's nice to have the variety. I really enjoy filmmaking itself. I really enjoy teaching production, in particular cinematography. But I get just as much fun out of teaching a class in Italian cinema, which I've done in the past as well.
I would think certainly editing today is a heck of a lot easier than what it used to be before, with having to splice the film and tape. I mean, I did that back when Tom and I were in school at SIU, and before that even. And so nowadays it's all digital and it's more detailed and a lot more things you can do with that. And so do you find that to be true? I mean, it's easier now or more difficult?
It's easier for someone who understands what editing is.
Uh-huh. Well, what is editing then? That's a good question.
Well, that's a really good question. What do editors do, right?
Yeah.
But I'm, to backtrack to your first statement,
Sorry.
I hated editing in film school. I wanted no part of it, working on an old moviola and taking film strip and cutting it and taping it and gluing it. I absolutely hated it. I hated the technical process. So with digital editing, that takes some of that out of the equation. So as an editor, when I'm teaching editing, we can get past the technical skills needed faster to get to telling the story, to get to building the performances of the actors, to getting to the guts of what the film is supposed to be about. And so I find that freeing the technical encumbrances of old style film editing has been helpful for me in my own small projects and for teaching. Of course, the flip side of that is every kid that owns a MacBook Pro thinks they're a film editor because they have the software built in, but they're not. And I think the analogy, Tom's a gifted writer. At least he tells me he's a gifted writer.
That's what I keep hearing people say also.
Yeah. And
I mean, they say he thinks he is. That's what they tell me.
And I'm sure he could speak
to
it. I'm sure word processing made you a better writer because you understand writing, and you can edit and you can revise drafts of your material so much more easily than you could with a typewriter and whiteout.
Here's the trick. And yes, you're right in how writers back in the day, and I started on a typewriter, how they did that. How did Ernest Hemingway write a whole novel on a typewriter? I don't get it because I'm constantly revising and editing and changing. So the first thing is the digital world of editing and even writing demands that you be willing to actually make changes. And a lot of new writers and editors, they get it done. Oh, I'm done. That's great. I did it, and therefore it must be good. Well, the fact is it might not be yet ripe on the vine, and so it's an amazing tool, but you have to be willing to exploit that tool to the nth degree. The thing about editing that I would add to this is, you asked, well, what does an editor do? The edit is the final rewrite in many ways of the story. It's very hard for people who write a script and get it produced to see that it's not exactly the way they had it in their head. Well, because there's human beings saying the words, there's 40, 60, 80, 100 people on the crew contributing detail. There's a director with an interpretive vision. You've got a guy like Kevin, and a cinematographer who has an interpretive vision and visually. So you get all of that stuff, and now you have this big box of data, of all this footage, digital footage, and somebody has to sort that out and do the ultimate telling of whatever that story was. That story is not in any way, shape, or form the same as it was when the writer had it in his or her head on day one. It changes because it has to. It's a living, breathing.
It's an organism. It's organic. I mean, really, it is.
It's an organism. That's right. And so the writer has to let go in many ways to the production unit. The director and the actors at a point have to let go to the post-production process. The director is, of course, still involved, at least in film, for the whole time, but it doesn't mean it's going to be what he or she thought they were shooting, because now there's new opportunities. You put this piece of film together with this piece of film and they have a different meaning than what he thought when he shot it. Mm-hmm. And so editors are extremely important. They start with that script supervisor's document of what was shot and what the director thought about it on the day. And then it's a new thing. At that point, it's no longer what anybody thought it was going to be. Now it is whatever it is. Sometimes it's better than you hoped, and a lot of times it's crap. It's nothing like you wanted it to be. And I guarantee you that Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese and every other filmmaker that ever lived looked at that first assembly and went, "Oh God, this is the worst piece of garbage I've ever seen. I'm gonna leave the business," because it usually is never what they thought it was going to be. Then you start to massage it and work on it, and you get it to wherever it can go with the help of a great editor and other people, sound composer.
Does the director look over the shoulders, basically, of the editors? I would think that they would be very involved with the editing process.
In movies, absolutely. In television,
not so much.
In television, the director is there for the first assembly. They do what they call their director's cut. They're allowed to deliver a show that's within 2 minutes of air length. So if the episode is 52 minutes long contractually with the network, they can do 50 minutes or 54 minutes, and that's it. They're done. They're off on the next. They're preparing the next episode, or they're off on the next job. And it's up to the producers, the showrunner, the producers, the editor, the post-production supervisors. Those guys have to then get the show done. And the final word is always the network. Whoever the executives are that are supervising the show, and they can do anything they want. They can change it. We hate that.
Sure.
We don't like that actor. Reshoot that. I mean, they can do whatever they want to do. It's their money and their show. And so it's a true collaboration. In television, the director is not the one that carries it to the finish line. It's the showrunner and his or her appointed people.
I have a thought on that as well, if I may. And
Please.
I'm glad you brought that up, Tom. There is a difference between television editors and directors and film television and editors. And I think the great directors that the kids like and have heard about, Ridley Scott, Martin Scorsese, they work regularly with the same editor because they're a collaborative team. Also, I think for those kids that are interested in film school, they need to be willing to do what Tom just mentioned. You have to give your stuff off. You don't want to be a writer, producer, a director, cinematographer for your own projects. A little YouTube thing, absolutely. But when you get into film school, one of the things that Tom and I learned, directors want to do their own editing, and they're not the most objective people because they love everything they shot, because it was so difficult for them to get the take, and they had to scrounge a little bit of money from their mother and their father to make the film. And they're very reluctant to cut things out. But that's where a good editor will come in and say, this doesn't work. The story is lagging. Their performance is poor. And so that's the kind of relationship you can learn to build in film school that will carry you through into the professional world as an editor, is being objective and honest.
And, it is very true that the editor is the only objective person in the food chain after this thing's been shot. The writer, the director, nobody else is DP. None of them are really objective anymore because they were a big part of it being made. So when the editor sees this footage, they look at the director's notes and the script supervisor report, and they assemble it, and then they start making judgments objectively, because they were not there the day the director spent 4 hours setting up dolly track to do a dolly shot through the village, and while bombs are blown off, and the director falls in love with that because it took so long to do, and they envisioned it, and they got it done, and it looks amazing, and the editor looks at it and goes, "That doesn't really help the story. This has got to get cut." And then they have to sell that idea. But without that objectivity, we all get very invested in what we do, even if it's a small project. Kevin and I did an industrial film together, and we worked really hard with a small crew to service a client that we were fond of, and we're really invested in this. But you have to let go at a point to the purpose you're doing this. You're not making the grand epic film of your career. You're doing something for a specific person and purpose, and objectivity is really important. And in that case, it was Alex Aseri was our editor, and he put together his best version of this, and then we were able to all get together and talk about it and figure out how do we make it better. Geez, what didn't we do, and how can we do it? And it was really a very strong collaboration. But without objective eyes, you're dead. And the film students, new filmmakers, do make that mistake. Kevin's absolutely right. They have this idea that they put on their backwards baseball cap, and they're a filmmaker, and it's writer, producer, director, editor. Maybe a couple of people can get away with that in the real world, but most of us, we mere mortals, need experts in each of those categories. I was a lighting director on productions when I was in college. I would never, ever try to light something. That's what Kevin does. He's the expert at that, and so forth. You just need to let go of stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of lighting, by the way, I did want to show this brief film here that he had put together. Can I add this and then let you talk a little bit about this, Kevin?
Just the one with the audio?
The one with no audio?
Or the one? Sure.
Which one do we show first?
This is the living room scene for the thing you and I did together.
Okay.
Very naturalistic setup, and he could talk a little bit about why it is whatever it is.
Right.
Well,
Let me get this start back to the beginning. Sorry.
There we go. Wrong one.
I never heard my dad apologize to anybody for
Sorry.
anything. You don't apologize for something.
We can talk about this one if you want.
Yeah.
Just fix it. That's how I am too. I don't feel the need to apologize to my son for the sorry state of our personal relationship.
Bill McGuire, a
I
wonderful
know
actor.
it's a mess. I know I need to do something about it. Just because he's a grown man doesn't mean that my job as a dad is over.
That's dramatic lighting.
I expect my wife is right. It's time for me to learn to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there we are.
that was a scene that Tom directed. And there's another actor that comes in that you handled wonderfully. I still remember that, the young
Communicate with
fellow
my
who-
son in a whole.
And if I remember the script correctly, Tom, the scene description was pretty sparse. It was basically an actor giving a soliloquy, like in a play, talking to the camera. He's really talking about his own emotions and his own feelings. And so we went for more of a theatrical, kind of an expressionistic look where the background was completely dropped out. We wanted that contrast, and then he would be hit by kind of a kind of what we call a 3/4 rear key to create some shadows on the face, a little bit of what we call fill light to take down some of the contrast, and then maybe just, if I remember correctly, on axis with the camera, a little bit of eye light. You can see I don't have much light in my eyes right here because I got very little notice to do this gig. And so I didn't have time to light myself. So you can see this contrast in the rimming of his shoulders there to make sure we had some depth. Otherwise he would disappear into the back. And so the idea was to give him a puddle of light where he could kind of walk and improvise and deliver his lines after Tom gave him directing notes. So it's a very unnatural style. It's a very theatrical style. But when you listen to the content, it's a very emotional scene where the actor is talking about a distance between him and his son, and he's trying to figure out how to reconcile that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, Bill McGuire is a fantastic actor. I was the camera operator also. I was not the bestie. We had somebody else do that. And I remember looking through the lens because I'm the viewfinder. I'm not a big fan of operating with monitors. I like to look through the viewfinder. So I really see the framing and the composition and give the director what they want. And I remember getting misty when he talked about his son, and he can't let that separation get any further. It's, and if you're a parent like I am, it was really well written and it was really well performed.
Kind of like Cats in the Cradle song.
Yeah. And I think even though the lighting's theatrical, it did take a back seat to the performance. And that's really what it's all about. Whether you're doing, you mentioned Scott, film noir, which I love. Everyone loves film noir, especially cinematographers. But it always took a back seat to the story. It always was there to support the story, whether it was thematic with the black and white and the contrast, dealing with, evil and, those shady characters you find in noir. So for this piece, I thought it worked really nicely because it also gave the actor freedom to move. He wasn't locked into having to stand under a spotlight. So we tried to stage it so we had, 4 or 5 feet left or right, a little bit forward and backwards so we could hold focus. And that allowed him the freedom, I think, to really give the performance that he gave, because we didn't have these tight binders on him and these marks that he had to hit, which can be kind of constraining and a very emotional scene.
You remember, Kevin, there were several vignettes in that script.
Yes.
And we built his movements according to his emotional build in the pieces. So there was one where he was actually just sitting on the stool, and we did it in sizes. We
Yes.
did in and then the wide, and then it was a huge wide shot. And but you used the term expressionistic, which people may not fully understand, is, as in paintings, it conveys the emotions of the character. So the scenic design can do that, the lighting and the whatever camera work can do that. And so in this case, this is a man struggling with this internal monologue, this angst, this awakening that he's having about his dysfunctional relationship with his adult son. And the lighting, it's not like we just said, wouldn't it be cool if we had, dramatic light in a dark room? No, it was to emotionally, subtly, subliminally convey the realities of his internal situation. And a guy going in and out of shadow, light striking you in a kind of an unconventional way on your face. And you notice he would go to a certain point. He's an experienced film actor. He's in Mission Impossible and a bunch of big movies and TV shows. But he knew how to go right to hit a part, and the light is perfect on him, and then he turned, and then the light is a little different. And he knew, because he could feel the light on his skin and the limitations of the parameters we set up. And Kevin was able to create the kind of slivers of his emotional state through that cameo type lighting. And it's really neat. And it was fun to do, fun to be there, fun to kind of, be part of that team to make that happen. But that's a beautifully lit scene, beautifully shot and performed. And, who wouldn't want to say they directed that? I mean, that looks great.
Lighting makes all the difference, certainly. In fact, I wanted to bring in this industrial film here, if I can add this to the stream then as well. Let's see if we can.
And I will simply say, we did two films for the same client. There's the same actor. And this is kind of a continuation of his family problems. That's his wife. And they're talking about, his awakening. And she's kind of putting it to him about, you're either going to have to get it together with the kids or not. But Kevin, go ahead and talk about the photographic challenge of this scene in this location with whatever, tools you had.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge here, this is someone's living room, someone's home. It's not a studio. You've got to be mindful of their set, so to speak. You can't do a lot of moving of the furniture. So the challenge here is to light something that doesn't look like it's been lit.
And that room did not look at all like that lighting wise.
It's very natural.
And that can be a challenge because, and I knew early in my film school career, I thought lighting was all about adding lights. And you learn after a while that lighting can be very, very subtle, and oftentimes you need to take away light. So for instance, that blind in the background, that was there, and that became very useful to drop it down and cut the light that was coming, the ambient light that was coming in.
You mean the light right back behind her?
Yeah, behind
right
her.
There,
yeah.
The blinds?
Yes, and when you go to the reverse angle, you'll notice there's a little bit of light on him for separation from this background, but it's not overpowering like the backlight that he had in the other scenario. Because
like he has a backfill light or something, yeah.
Just a little bit of glint on his hair. I can't remember how many lights are lighting this scene, but I want to say at least 4. You can see he's got a little bit of eye light right there. That may be coming from a light off camera, off frame left. I can't quite remember, or it's natural light coming in from the window.
I think we had a little bounce board. I think we had a white card and a small light reflecting off of that into his face to just fill it in a little.
Fill it in a little bit. And then a lot of it is very subtle, right? Based on the actor's face, if we're in close, if we're wide, do we need like some of it is basically, as a cinematographer, also you're helping with the blocking. So for instance, if Tom had staged this and his head was in that stairway right there, right? Let's say he was over frame left a little. I would have made the suggestion as the camera operator, how about we slide him over a little bit so he's not in this black trough, right? So part of being a photographer is also being not just the lighting, but it's the framing and the composition. We're in charge of that as well.
Right.
So in the initial blocking, you can see also we blurred the background a little bit right there. And so control of what we call the depth of field, the foreground, the middle ground, and background is always critical. Do we want everything in the frame to be deep and in focus, made famous by Orson Welles and Greg Toland in Citizen Kane? Or maybe because we can't completely control the set, there was some obnoxious material back there. So we would then manipulate the photography to go soft focus and keep it from distracting from their performances. So there's a lot that goes into, once we got the basic set lit, to feel natural, even though you can see there's light in her eyes, which isn't natural, but it's natural for movies and people accept that. Then we're looking at composition, framing, obnoxious things coming out of their head in the background. And then for me as a DP, I would ask Tom, where do you want the focus? Where do you want the audience to look? It's the most powerful thing to direct an audience to where the director wants them to look. Do you want them to look at him, her, the background, the foreground? And so then we're constantly dealing with framing and composition, focus. You can see things drop out in focus back in the background. But if Tom wanted to see that as a director, then it's my job to make that happen. There might be a poster back there that, was symbolic of something. And he would say, no, we've got to see the poster. It's kind of like Tom, I noticed in his framing here, he's got his director's chair behind him, right? So look at that, executive producer. He obviously wanted the audience to see that. Now, as a cinematographer, I might say, that's a little too self-promoting. Why don't we throw that out of focus? I don't think see that.
That's funny.
So then there's the wide shot. And when you're lighting a scene like this, you always light the wide first because it's the most difficult to shoot. And so the set was lit. And then when you go in close, then that's when you can add the little bounce fill. You can throw a little kick on the hair. You can add a little bit of highlight to make the actors look good. And this is called cheating, but it's done all the time. You look at the opening scene of Blade Runner, the original Ridley Scott. It's you mentioned noir, Scott. It's techno noir. You can hardly see the faces of the characters in the wide. By the time you get in close, you can see their eyes, you can see their faces.
Good point.
You want to see the actors act. You want to see their skin move. You want to see their eyes cringe. You want to see their smiles. And if they're shrouded in darkness, it doesn't work. It works for the initial setup, but you can cheat a lot when you move in close. You just have to be delicate when you cheat.
Yeah, because sometimes I see people wearing hoodies or whatever kind of cover, like in Star Wars or something, and then you finally have the reveal of the bad guy or something,
One thing I would add to that is he pointed out something really interesting. So the first thing we did was that wide shot. Put the camera up in the stairs and shot down. And we staged the scene so they all knew where they were going and when they were going there and why. Very simple scene. Couples talking across the divider, the back of the couch, and then he comes around to join her and they sit down. And those movements are based on the content of the script, which you couldn't hear here. But so we talked about, well, here's the setting. They're going to wind up here. Kevin was able to look around. We picked the high wide shot for the master scene. We did the whole scene from that angle, but you only saw it 3 times. You saw it at the beginning and at the end and once in the middle when the husband walks around and joins her. And that's all you need because it establishes a geography, because many people don't understand that usually you have 1 camera, maybe 2 shooting these scenes, and you don't do them once. You have to do it many times from many different angles. And I think we had 1 camera, and so he's up in the stairway. We do it that way. we get what we wanted, and it's kind of like almost a dress rehearsal, because the actors know you're not going to use a lot of that material. You want their close-ups, you want to see in their eyes. And then we went in and did all the different camera angles. And if you went back and showed it again, you'd see how many sizes of frames are there. There's quite
that's why I was going to ask how many takes did it take? It just seemed like, yeah, it was a one camera shot or shoot, but I figured they must be redoing that same scene dozens of times, because you had to reset the lights and then they go run through the whole thing again. So, okay, let's try this again. So how many times would they actually?
Probably did a couple from the master shot, I think, Kevin, and then we came around to facing the couch, and we did the whole scene several times in a 2-shot, and then we did the over the shoulder of her to him behind the thing, and then we had close-ups of the two of them. And so, but you wind up doing things a couple of times, even with experienced film actors like this. Takes them a while to warm into it and to kind of find what they want to do and want to listen to that, and fine tune maybe the lighting or the camera work. Kevin says, "Oh, geez, we can do better with this. Let me move this camera over a foot." So I don't know how many times we ultimately did it, but it was probably a dozen times cumulatively of all the different angles. Let's go back in and get that one close up, that one line, like to try that one line with a little bit more of this or that, or less of this or that. And these are film actors. They know how to go back and forth and jump around the timeline of reality for their character and whatever it is they're doing. And that made it a lot of fun, but you'd never know that scene was lit. That's the whole point. Cinematographers usually don't want you to notice their lighting. It's usually want the story and the performances to jump forward, not the cool, lighting effects that they add to it. Sometimes you need that, but usually you want it to look, in this case, naturalistic. So nothing got in the way of what the message of this lovely script was that we both inherited from the producers and the writer.
Well, that's something we're doing right now. It seems with in Zoom meetings and everything else, of like the show we're doing tonight, where we have lighting and everything. It's all about lighting, and I think you can either have too much, as you'd said there, Kevin, or you can have too little, or at the wrong place, or something. And so there has to be in a class just for lighting. Certainly, I mean, people who major in just that.
Yeah, well, there are many classes in lighting and photography. Yeah. I could tell you, Kevin didn't learn this stuff, in a weekend. I mean, it's a life quest, like most of these craft skills, to be a master screenwriter, master cinematographer, production designer. I mean, these things take a lifetime to master. And, someone like Kevin and people like him are studying film all the time, whether he's working as a cinematographer or teaching it or talking about it with students in other contexts. It's a lifetime study. There's a lot to learn, and you never know all of it.
And if I could just build on that, the way Tom was describing how we shot that scene, unlike the studio scene where we could let the camera run in what we would call more of a long take, to let the actor play it out in real time. And then, as Tom mentioned, there were vignettes and we would restart. What we did in the living room is very traditional, where we shot in what's called master scene technique. And this takes us full circle back to our discussion with editing. So when Tom's directing and I'm on camera, we're always trying to deliver the material so the editor can cut together that scene that feels seamless to you, the viewer. So we talked earlier about the script supervisor, and we had one to make sure that when they sat at the couch in the wide shot, they sat at the couch the same way in the close-ups. So you get what's called coverage. We have them enter and exit frames, so the editor has some action to cut on. So even though the departments are separate, the cinematographer and the director are acutely aware of what the editor needs. So we tried to give the editor the material they needed so they could edit the scene in a continuous way. and allow the editor then to find the performances within the footage that Tom directed.
That's it's a perfect way of putting it. And, this is a team sport, Scott. If people don't really know that, they watch their favorite movie and it's just great, but it's not just, their favorite director and the star and, whatever, and John Williams' score. There's a lot that goes into these things. And even a simple living room scene like we're looking at, neither Kevin or I are saying, look at this. This is the most incredible, challenging scene anybody ever shot. It is a very simple scene, deliberately simple in its writing, in its execution, and its performances, so the actors can emote and tell this story for the purposes of our client. And the script supervisor and all these other people, it's a very intimate collaboration. One of the reasons it's been fun working with Kevin on things is, we know each other really well and we can talk in a certain degree of shorthand. He can make fun of me. My director's chair in my office. He makes fun of me. I don't care. But he's because we know each other and we can do this on the set. We can have fun with each other at each other's expense
in a teamwork and family way.
Yes, of course. And if you can't work that way, then it's a really rough road making these things, because it's never easy like it ought to be. There's always something that makes it harder than you thought it was going to be or thought it should have been. And, we had obstacles in this thing as well, and small ones, but still things. We had a finite period of time and we had limited resources and responsibility to these producers that we were very fond of. And so the well-oiled machine, includes that intimate collaboration where you can say, Tom, you're an idiot. We can't do it this way. Kevin, I don't think so. Let's do it this way. I mean, you have to be able to get to these moments and exploit each other's expertise and point of view whenever possible to get the job done in the best way. The director is not the director and the dictator. There are a few of those around, but most of us are not that way. Same thing with the cinematographer. They're not all knowing. They've got the bestie. They've got the crew. They've got guys who say, what if I put this light up here instead of that? I know what you wanted that, but wouldn't this be better? Sometimes they're right. And DP has to listen.
But you have to feel comfortable saying that too. And that's something I think you or Steve said last week, or maybe Mark before, in which they said it's important to know everybody when you're kind of coming through, or you're pointing to somebody on a ladder up there, hanging the lights, say, Joe, how's your wife doing? And how's your kid doing at school? I mean, you kind of know everybody, so they feel comfortable about making those kinds of suggestions to the director and to everybody else, saying, what if I move the light a little bit like that? Well, that's your job. That is a pretty good idea. So, but they have to be open and feel comfortable, I think, to offer those suggestions. And by being in a team, family type of environment, they're more comfortable doing that.
I remember Kevin, we were shooting the kitchen scene, which these audience has not seen, but there were some challenges with the light coming through this large kind of kitchen window, huge window, and some, whatever the details were, but that light was messing up what you were trying to do. We did the master shooting towards that window, and you were able to get your aperture right and everything. But then we coming around doing the coverage, that light was a problem. I think the sun was moving, or one of them, but it was a huge thing. And I remember at one point, whatever the specifics were, Kevin just said, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do about this, but it's going to take me a little longer than I thought. No problem. Step away, let him figure it out with his guys, and he did. And we don't have that scene here, but just again, another simple scene: two characters talking in a kitchen, master over the shoulder, cover. Very simple staging, but the light was changing constantly, and it was a huge window, and we didn't have the ability to tarp it all in and things like you would do in a real movie. And but it's like Kevin said, hey, this is what I'm up against. I got to figure it. Okay, no problem. Because you understand, he knows what his job is, and he's saying, it's out of my control. I look at how this is changing. I got to work on this, and then had to come up with whatever that solution was. And those are the moments where your collaboration, your relationship, you can't be impatient and whatever, because he didn't do it. The sun was moving. Like, okay, get used to it. That's life. And you learn to think on your feet. He had to, I had to, the actors had to in some circumstances. And you remembering that?
Yeah, it was the window over the sink. That was the problem. I can't remember exactly how.
Window box kind of thing or something. Yeah.
Yeah. We ended up having to block it out or reblock the actors a little bit. But, to build on what Tom was saying and what you were mentioning, Scott, about collaboration, it's a word that can't be overemphasized in production, because no matter how simple the scene, they're still difficult to do. And of course, time and money and budget all play into those kinds of things. And when you're working with a small crew and people are wearing different hats, you've got to improvise. You got to think on your feet. And at the end of the day, if you treat people on a crew like you want to be treated, you're going to be fine. And if you don't take things personal, you'll be fine. It's the indignant crew members that think that if you say, hey, maybe if we did this, they take it personally, you've got trouble. So something I always preach to my students is don't take it personally if A, somebody makes a suggestion that's better than the one you had, and B, be willing to take some advice, because we don't know it all. We never know it all. You learn something every time you go on set, because every set is different. Every set of circumstances is different. Every day is different. The light's different on every day of the year. And so adaptability and flexibility are key things for success, not just in filmmaking, obviously in life. But when you're on set and you're under pressure and you've only got the location for 6 hours, you got to make those judgment calls. Tom could have said, look, I can't give you the time, Kevin, to fix that window. We're just going to have to move in close, reblock it, shoot it, and we'll live with it. But if we have the time and he respects me and says, I think I'll give you 45 minutes, then I'll get it done. And if I can't get it done, then I got to go to him and go, I can't get it done. We're going to have to reblock.
Something people, Scott, need to, if they don't already know it, movies, you hear about movies shooting for weeks and weeks or months and months. So, your typical small movie has a 25 or 30-day shooting schedule.
All right.
And a bigger movie would be 60 days or so. 70 days, pretty large movie. So every day you're going to a place, many times not in a movie studio, like we were at somebody's actual home for that scene. And you show up that day, you prepared it, you've been there, you took pictures of it, you talked about it, you had production meetings, everybody knew what they thought they needed to know. And then you get there and some reality sits in, and it's nothing but a series of problem-solving tasks. That is really the dirty secret of production, is that it's not all this creativity. Oh, my vision. I see Kevin, and it's going to be this with the little light across. No, it's problem solving. I want to do this, but I can't for these reasons. How do we fix those and mitigate those? And it's all problem solving. The producer does problem solving throughout prep and shooting. The director, problem solving, changes throughout prep and shooting. Then the director of photography comes on board. I see what you guys approved, and I know what you wanted to do, and I've been on the location scouts, and I saw everything, but you know what? These are problems, and now I have to solve them. And then you have all these other people, and you'll meet some of them in coming weeks. The assistant director, Tyler Stratton's going to come on and about being assistant director, who's a former student of ours. He's DGA, a Directors Guild member now, and assistant director, done a lot of different projects and some big hit series. But he'll talk about the assistant director's role in all of that, keeping it moving, keeping people from kind of coming unraveled under the pressure of these changes and these challenges that come up. But you got a whole bunch of days that don't always make sense. And as we talked about last week, you're shooting things out of sequence often. For the actors, you have to really spend time and care in helping them move from A to Z in an alphabet that is nothing like A to Z. It's all over the place in terms of what scenes shoot on what day, for like that house. If that were part of a big movie and that was on day one, well, that's a pretty pivotal emotional scene for those two actors. And to do that on day one would be hard for them, even if they are professionals. And forget Kevin's problems or my problems. These actors have to act it, and they don't even know. They just met. Hello, how are you? Hi, I'm your wife. Oh, nice to meet you. You know, and you have to. That's what production is. It's nothing but a series of problem-solving challenges.
And there may be scene changes also, as you had talked about before, Tom, where they might have just been working on something throughout the day and practicing the actors that is, but then they slide a new script under their door, and they've got a whole new script the next day.
Or somebody shows up on the set and says, the scene you're going to do, next, well, we rewrote it. And now all the lines they learned and the expectations, they imagined how it's going to be. I remember I worked on a thing once where it was a man and a woman walking through the woods together. It's a romantic thing where they're starting to spark a little bit, and they get down to a riverbed, and they have a scene. And in the script, it said, and they sit down on a rock, and he sweeps her in his arms and kisses her. So the director was staging the scene. And then he says, okay, and you're going to go down the river's edge, and then you turn her around, and she walks away, and you turn around and kiss her. He goes, and the actress, had imagined the whole scene sitting on this rock as scripted. And the director said, yeah, but we're not going to be sitting on the rock. We can't do the rock. We're going to do this, and this is the way I want to do it. And it was a moment for her of adjustment. She's very experienced, rather well-known name as a character actress, and it threw her. For some reason, that scene meant a lot to her, and she imagined it exactly as. And in fact, it was a script I wrote, and it was exactly as written. I didn't care if they sat on a rock or not. I wrote it because it sounded romantic when I wrote it. But the director had a whole thing, the way he was going to shoot it with a Steadicam coming all the way down this path into the river, and he was going to, angles with the river and all the river rocks in both directions. It was fabulous. It was much better than them sitting on some rock. It had to be addressed because she was thrown, and he had to, take her aside and explain to her the realities of the real world, which is, you're the actor, I'm the director, we have this much time, and you're doing it this way. And she kind of had to, okay. But for a moment, she couldn't get out of her little vapor lock of what she thought it was going to be. And that was one of those production changes. It wasn't a dialogue change in this case. It was how it was going to be staged and the sweeping kind of continuous single shot that it was going to be almost all the way through, except for the coverage of them kissing at the very end. He didn't want it on some rock. He wanted it with the river coming and going both directions, the mountains, and it was fabulous. Right. Much better than what I wrote. And but that's what filmmaking is. Moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day, week by week. Guys like Kevin, guys like me, and a few other key people on a set, production designer, AD, and so forth, have to figure these things out together and keep it moving so you get your, we have 6 pages to do today. We have 8 pages to do today. We have 4 pages to do today. You have to shoot those pages and be done by the allotted time. And it's hard when everything isn't perfect. But well,
there are a lot of changes, and of course, ways you have to be flexible and go with the flow, I guess. And so a question I've got then also for Kevin, for you, you've got 2 hats, major hats you wear, whether you're going to be a cinematographer or a professor. Those are 2 different jobs. I don't know how you can take off one and put on another one. Do you find them to be different or interrelated, and how difficult is that to change hats?
Well, I'll just put it this way. I don't do cinematography for a living. I'm an educator, but for a living. So when I do cinematography, it's usually for friends. It's for shorts. I did a short a couple years ago when I went on sabbatical. I see that Russell Parks just said hello to all of us. Russell's a former Long Beach State student. He crewed on a little film that I DP'd that we put together just to use El Camino and CSULB students. And a former Long Beach State student directed it. He directs in Brazil now. And we did it just as one of those community things to get people more experience. And Russell did the VFX on this little Batman short that we shot at Cal State Long Beach. So my major hat is teaching and educating. My hobby, I guess you would say, is cinematography. And I still like being on set. I don't like the 12-hour days as much as I used to. So I try and keep them at 8 hours. And I'm always interested in if there's a good project to do. And working in shorts is kind of like great because the production days, 3 or 4 days, I love getting alumni and students on set to get them experience. So sure, if an opportunity came along to shoot an adaptation of Tom's film, I might be game to take sabbatical. Tom's novel, excuse me. So yeah, I really only wear one hat, and once in a while I turn it around backwards and pretend I'm a DP. Not because I like backwards hats, but you have to turn it backwards to look into the viewfinder. Otherwise it gets in the way.
There is a reason why you would do that then. Okay.
There it is.
There's a reason. The problem is on day one of film school, half these guys are putting their baseball caps on backwards because they think somehow
that's what you do.
That's what you do. And it's like, it's just guys like Kevin and me, we laugh at that because it's a cliche. It's almost like a badge of honor, and you have to earn it, kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think when I got accepted to graduate school at USC, my mom asked me to promise her I wouldn't pierce my ear and get a tattoo. I said, and I won't wear a leather jacket either, because that was one of the other icons of being in a film school in Hollywood.
Oh, that's funny. That's really funny. Well, I would also say that Kevin is a superb educator, and not just because he's an old friend. And we collaborated. We taught parallel sections, a couple of the same classes, and we talked philosophically about how to teach them and problems and all of that stuff. And it was really fun. But he's not a full-time cinematographer by choice, not by force. And there are some people, friends of ours, or people we've heard of that are teaching because they could not maybe do some of these jobs as a full-time matter. And Kevin certainly could, but he also happens to love sharing what he knows, and he worked real hard to learn this. And you need people like that. But the other part about higher education, Scott, is that they want you in good programs. They want you as a faculty member to continue your professional creative activity, or to at least write textbooks or something to keep current and with what's happening, and to keep your skill set sharp. So when I was a professor, I would do music videos, or I did a documentary at one point. We did our corporate videos together, and the university wants that. You need it to get tenure, but they also want you to stay fresh and be part of things. And one of the things Kevin and I always loved to do was bring in former students, as he mentioned, and some current students even, to work on these things with us, because that's the best kind of internship they're going to have. They're going to learn more doing some of that, working side by side with industry professionals under real world conditions for a client of some sort, than they're going to learn in a classroom doing classroom exercises, which are fine. Classroom exercises here, the same exercise but done professionally for a client, has a different standard for everybody. And we love working with students, the best and brightest of those students, to come in or former students to work with us. And some of them are really, really good, and they just flourish in that environment.
I would think one of the hardest things for your job is to look for the next job. In other words, it's always just a short-term thing, unless you, I guess, are under contract with a studio for some period of time, or X number of movies or films or series or whatever. But I would think when you were on the cast and crew, particularly the crew, a lot of people seem to stay together. I will often see where a director has several of the same actors and several of the same crew that tend to follow that person, or this group kind of stays together.
Well, first of all, it's a freelance business. There are very few people. There's some executives and some people in the accounting department, marketing. They have full-time jobs. But everybody else, all the people actually make the product that they distribute or air on TV, they're all freelance people. You work for so many weeks and then you're out of work. That's
Oh,
it.
okay. Yeah.
And there's no guarantee you may even be brought back in this next season if it's a TV series. And so,
how do you make house payments and how do you make commitments based on that?
And Kevin and I have struggled explaining that to our students for a long time. It's not easy. A freelance life is not for everybody. That's for sure. You have to, when you're making money, it's usually pretty good money when you get to at least a certain level of experience, and you have to learn to live within your means. And then you're out of work. Now you're living off your savings. And there are periods in my career where I did really well for several years, and then I didn't work for a year, and because I waiting for another series to come along. So you're going to spend all your money in a year with your mortgage and your family and your child in school, and so you need to manage your life like with the same proficiency you manage your task on a movie set. And Kevin, what am I leaving out?
No, I think that's absolutely right. And when you review film curriculum, especially at the undergraduate level, probably a class they should integrate is called personal finance, right?
Yes.
For the reasons Tom just talked about. I do think also advice I was given as an undergrad and one I try and share with students is, you're right, Tom, it is a freelance network, especially in the movie industry. But then nowadays, there are so many other opportunities where you might be able to work more long-term, like on a long-running television show. I always tell students, just flick on your TV or YouTube TV. How many cable stations are there? 1 million. They all need production crews. They all need writers. They all need script supervisors. I'm a big fan of cooking shows. I'm not afraid to say it. I think Guy Fieri is great, right? And he goes on, diners, drive-ins, and dives, and he's got a crew with him, cinematographer, 2 sound people. He's probably got a driver to take his Camaro. He's probably got makeup, and they travel all over. I was talking to a student the other day that goes, I really like cinematography and travel. I go, get on a travel show. Right? Get on a food show.
Oh, yeah.
Join this channel. And you could probably get into a smaller, maybe not the big money of Hollywood, but having a steady job because, they've done 1,000 episodes of Guys Grocery Games. Probably got them all.
Did you see that Russell Parks just posted that his job at Disney ended today, so tomorrow will be a fun day? Thank you. Scott, do you know Russell Parks?
I don't.
He's a fellow magician.
He's a fellow magician.
And he's a member of the Magic Castle. So when you next perform there, you and Russell need to meet each other. He's a former student.
I apologize. I may know him, but name doesn't ring a bell.
Russell Parks, yeah. But maybe he just knows you through your podcast. But he's a fellow magician and a good one. So you guys need to know each other. But Kevin is absolutely right in that there's a lot of different ways to have a life and a career in this, and to be on a reality show or a cooking show or something like that. There's no dishonor in that. Some students think, well, I got to work on some big, mega Hollywood feature to be important. Well, no, it's first thing is you want to learn your craft. And then the second thing is you want to have a steady income if you can get that. And, but even if you're on a series, if you're a grip and on a TV series, your job is to be the best grip they have, because at the end of the season you may not be asked back because there's a new bestie who wants to bring in his guys, the new guys, and suddenly you're out. Even though they all liked you, you were great, but now there's a new regime. They changed producers who changed some of the crew people, and the crew people, the department heads changed the guys they brought in because they have their guys. Now you're out of work. So it's really important. You can't take it personally. It's just the nature of the beast. And so if you don't like that, then maybe this isn't the business for you. Maybe you need to work at, a company where you work 52 weeks a year and you have 2 weeks vacation, and that's important for many people. But in this business, the better you are, the more often you'll work, the less of this there is. I, for a long time, knew that ultimately the phone would ring for my agent or somebody that I'd work with, and hey, we're looking for a guy. You want to come in? But it wasn't always that way, and sometimes it didn't ring for a long time. It's like, well, geez, what am I going to do now? Well, I would go in and write another screenplay or a novel or something. I was always busy, but I wasn't always making an income when I wasn't employed. And you learn to live on what you're doing, and you
Live within your means.
Yeah.
You talk about me being a magician and everything, and certainly that is a gig performer also, where you're always looking for the next job, certainly. And likewise, right now we are gig performers, which includes everyone in the entertainment business. I'm talking about on Broadway, that you're singers or dancers or working on the crew behind or whatever, that a lot of things are shut down and people are unemployed. And it's not they're looking for their next job. They're just trying to waiting for that job. They are certain something will come, because I think once this is all over, everybody will be rushing again to go and see live entertainment and going to the theater, going to the movies. Certainly right now, we're watching a lot of Netflix and binge watching whatever kinds of shows and everything. However, a lot of new material, new stuff is not being made. So I think I would imagine some of the production companies are just pulling things off the shelf that had been sitting there for a long time, but they didn't think they were going to show. It's like, well, we need something new. So they'll grab something, I'm assuming, because more people are staying home, obviously, and watching that because they can't get to the theater or to the movie houses. And that's why movies have, I think, thrown themselves into Netflix, and also they will simulcast. You can go to the theater, to the movie house, or you can rent the newest movie for whatever and stay home and watch it,
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly pulling things out of the vault. There's a lot of material that people have never seen. The feature film-wise, many, 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 many titles with many stars that have never been released. And sure, they find their way to Netflix or Hulu or someplace ultimately, because they want to get their money out. But productions are cranking up. I mean, people are back in production. California's got real restrictive rules, but the Screen Actors Guild and the Directors Guild have figured out how they would allow things to work, and so people are doing things, but it's slow. And yes, there's a lot of people hurting, and which again, it has nothing to do with the freelance world, because there's people in civilian jobs that are hurting badly as well. But it'll come back, and I would say, I know Kevin feels the same way. I mean, there are tons of opportunities for people. With all these platforms, all these channels, all these streaming services, I mean, say what you will about how people get noticed once they have made a show and have the world even know they exist. That's a whole other matter. But there's a lot of employment for people in a lot of categories, and it's a wonderful time to be young and just starting out in this business. It's unlimited if you are willing to maybe a little flexible with your ambitions. I'm only going to work on this. I will never work on a reality show. Well, good luck to you then. Because you want to run a camera, you want to learn what Kevin knows.
Take what you can get.
Go be a camera operator and a cinematographer on a reality show, shooting in every possible lighting situation, running and gunning, as we say, with very little preparation. You'll learn more about the camera and how to do it doing that in a season than you will in 5 years of being, a PA on some huge movie.
Right.
It's just the way it works. I mean, doing it in any capacity is a way to learn any of these tasks. And Kevin, you talk to your students about this all the time. I know, because they're all very young and very new.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it a few years ago, Tom, when we were still teaching. We were talking to students and saying, don't be afraid to open doors that you hadn't considered, and don't have blinders on. You have to educate yourself, not just in media production and the entertainment industry. You have to educate yourself in what's available out there in the world. It's like, I was talking with a student the other day, and I said, "Are you bilingual?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, have you studied the incredible growth in Spanish language programming? Univision and Telemundo merged. The demand for that product is huge. Writing, directing, producing, television programs that will be aired all over the Spanish-speaking world." Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Well, that's part of our job, right?
Yeah.
And look at the explosion of production in Asia, with the the Parasite winning all the Academy Awards.
No, that's true.
And I think that is so important as educators, that we tell them that it isn't. Yeah, Hollywood was the epicenter of production in the 30s and the 40s and into the 50s. It's still big, but the rest of the world is much bigger.
By the way, if I'm not mistaken, that movie was edited in Final Cut 7.
Yes, on set.
Which is, Scott, an obsolete editing, a very popular editing.
That's the one you told me about. That's now DaVinci, right?
Well,
it's a freeware.
Guys went over, but this was the independent film kind of program and film student program 10 years ago. Nobody's using it. They don't support it anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. And they cut this amazing movie in that program, and not one of the high budget trendy programs that the industry standard would say you have to use. I mean, I don't know if some computers won't even run Final Cut 7 probably anymore, but they did it, but somebody figured that out, and they saved some money doing it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, listen, Kevin, thank you very much, for being our guest today. This has been really great, and I also want to make a pitch also over there for what Tom has done. He's got these books out, Devious Thinking and Silent Partners. Can you talk about that? Where are they available if somebody wanted to buy them, and what are they about?
Well, first of all, right there, it says my website is there, tomblumquist.com. So all the information about both books is there. There's links to buy on Amazon, or you can go straight to Amazon. Devious Thinking is my new one, and that is a revenge comedy, mostly set in Rome, and I had just a huge amount of fun writing that, based on some characters and people and incidents in my past that inspired me. And the other one, Silent Partners, is a forensic thriller, which was a true kind of passion project. It took me many years to write that, pulling it out of the drawer, working on it, putting it back in the drawer. And when I talked about being in between series and wasn't working, I'd pull out Silent Partners, I'd work on it, and I'd get a job, and I'd put it back. So it was that kind of project, and I finally got it done. And the response to that has been, really gratifying. So thanks for mentioning that. And and Kevin, I thank you for assigning it to both books to all of your students at El Camino College.
As long as I get a cut.
Checks in the mail, I'm sure.
There's a glass of wine in it for you when you come and visit us in Charleston.
Sounds good. Maybe I'll stop in Houston on the way.
Yeah,
there you go.
You should, because you got to go to the Palazzo de Wells there, I think. So.
Yeah, that's right. I call this Mystic Haven is the name of my home. So you could join me here. Well, listen, I'm going to say goodnight then right now to those who are viewing, and thank everyone for tuning in. And for those who did see this, if you would please share this, tell others about this. We're trying to find the right demographic. I know there is a huge following for films and television and this kind of content that we're providing. So I implore you to go out and please help spread the word and let people know about this venue, or this podcast, this broadcast, I guess, that we're doing from time to time. So please go out and let people know about this. And Kevin, if you'll hang around after the broadcast has ended, that Tom and I just like to chat just a little bit offline over here then too, just to for a few minutes. So if you got a little bit of time to hang around, and for the rest of everybody else, thank you very much again for joining us. That was Kevin O'Brien as our guest, and Tom Blumquist, and this is Scotty out.
Thanks for being with us. Please join us again next time for Mincing Movie Magic.